Hi, I'm Jeremiah. Welcome to Up at Night. This podcast is all about learning from thought leaders, academics, and professionals based on one fundamental question. What keeps you up at night? Welcome to Up at Night. I'm thrilled to have a good friend of mine on the pod today, Damiano Raveenthiran, founder of BrandButter. Today we're gonna talk a little bit about what truly makes a great agency in our digital age and how to build one from scratch. So, Damiano, thank you so much for joining me today. And I would like to dive right into it because you've had a long track record of working with agency, within agency, building your own. Tell me why. It's such a crowded space.
Why?
It's so complicated. Why going through that path?
So first of all, thank you for having me, Jeremiah. I really appreciate it. I'm a big fan of this podcast, so I'm happy to be on it. Why the agency model? So I'll tell you why. So I actually started the agency model 10 years ago. So I'm 34 now. I started as an entrepreneur when I was 24. And, when I started as an entrepreneur, I had done multiple business models. I, tried dropshipping, e-commerce, kind of like trying to find any way to make extra cash on the side. At the time, I only had $400 in my bank account, and I just wanted to figure out how to become financially free, which is something that drives a lot of people, I think. When I stumbled upon the agency model, one of the things that I realized was that this is actually a great first business model. And I've always said this for the last 10 years. Like, if you're a first-time entrepreneur and you don't know what to start and you don't have a lot of money, but you want to learn the skills of running a business, of scaling a business, of even like doing sales and talking to your clients, the agency model doesn't require anything. Like, it doesn't need any money. It doesn't need any sort of like preconceived knowledge. You don't need to go to school to run an agency. You basically just learn a skill and you get really good at that skill and you start offering it to people. It's as simple as that. And then eventually you grow a team that allows you to do that. So in the last 10 years, I've coached quite a few people on starting and growing agencies. And that's kind of what I found is that if you're a first-time entrepreneur, this is the best business model to really get you started and really get you, even understanding what business is. So that's why I started an agency. And that's why I'm really passionate about starting agencies, because I've seen the agency business model actually change a lot of people's lives.
Yeah. And like you said, it is a competitive model. So you have to be good at it. You have to have one skill set where you excel at. And I tend to agree with you. I think it's a great business model where you can risk and de-risk quite easily, where you don't have to manage complicated cash flow and products and things like that. So I think it's a great advice. Now, you recently started BrandButter, and it's doing well. What makes BrandButter different from other agencies?
Yeah, when we started BrandButter, we noticed that these large brands, when it came to their marketing, there was something that always got people excited within the brand itself. And that was whenever the brand did something really bold and what we call a radical marketing campaign. You can think of like Red Bull sending someone to, skydive, but like from space. Or we have tons and tons of different examples of that happening. And so we really coined this term called the radical marketing campaign. And, these massive stunts that get a lot of PR, they get a lot of impressions, they get a lot of people talking about the brand itself. And then basically when we coined that term, the radical marketing campaigns, we created an entire agency and an entire service around it. And that's kind of what we do. We go up to companies and we ask them like, hey, if you put a radical marketing stunt in your marketing budget this year, and if you haven't thought about that, then let us help you think about that so that we can really get your brand at the forefront of culture and to really have an impact in mainstream culture as we know it today. So that's kind of where BrandButter was born, and that's really our mission, is to work on campaigns that make advertising history.
That's really a good model because it's a niche within the industry, but it's a niche that in the world where everything is fast food, when you think about marketing, right? It's create content all the time because that content's going to be terrible in a couple of weeks from now. This can be used, reused, and we're still talking about what Red Bull did, with the jump from outer space. That was crazy. Do you have some example you could share with us, maybe about what would be these radical marketing campaign in the real world?
Yeah, so I would love to be able to share examples publicly, but I can't yet because we actually started the agency 10 months ago. And we have we're actually working on a lot of these campaigns that are going live next year. You'll definitely hear about some of the campaigns that we're working on next year. But it is still under NDA. The most exciting stuff I can't really talk about that much. But to give you an idea, we've done things like concerts. Our team has worked on we did a bunch of advertising campaigns for shows like Game of Thrones, for example, where we went in London and we basically took a bunch of bus stops in London and turned them into dragon's nests with an egg in it, just to sort of get people thinking about the new season of the show that's coming out. We've done massive billboards for brands that you might not be aware of that were radical in their own way. And basically, the idea is that it might be just a billboard or it might be just a bus stop that we turn into a dragon's egg. But the goal is to get influencers and media really talking about it, and to get a lot of that earned media. We are working on some pretty radical stuff for next year that is going live next year, and we're really pushing the boundaries of what's possible with marketing. And we're working with some really, really cool brands. So I'd love to be able to tell you what it is, but where we are right now in 2024, I can't do that just yet. Well, maybe in 6 months we could do another podcast.
Okay. So people will have to check your website and follow you on social media to get these crunchy little details. We know each other pretty well. We're I would consider a good friend, and one thing that I find amazing, Damiano, is how busy you are, yet you apply that creativity and networking superpower you have, in my opinion, at helping other. And I would like you to touch base a little bit about what's your view on networking, your network, and how important it is when building a business and being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, good question. So, I think networking is the most important thing when you're running a business. And I've experienced that, when I started the agency, usually an agency, it's 4 departments, right? You have lead generation, sales, project management, and delivery. And you said it yourself, the agency model is very, very competitive. So when you're in a room with a bunch of other agency owners, everybody asks themselves or each other the same question, which is, how do you get your clients? And it's always the same question. It's like, what do you do to get your clients? And so early on, I sort of noticed that this was a recurring theme. And I decided, if I'm going to get good at anything, I'm going to get really good at lead generation. And I noticed that the best way to do that is to build trust and familiarity. Jeremiah, you said it yourself, the agency model is extremely competitive. But what makes the difference and what makes a brand want to work with an agency is the amount of trust that they have in that agency and the amount of familiarity that they have in them. And so I've kind of realized that throughout my journey running a business, what has always moved me forward was really investing in those relationships where the people ended up becoming familiar with me, and then they ended up trusting me. And because of that, they gave me access to their brands and let me do marketing or development or anything like that for them. So networking, I would say, is the most important thing when you're running a business. I've been doing this for 10 years. I've seen a lot of businesses succeed, and I've also seen a lot of businesses fail. I've seen a lot of people sell their business and move on to other ventures afterwards. The one thing that always stays with you is your network. People always say your network is your net worth. And that's very, very true. The more people you add to your network that are influential and that can really move the needle on certain things, the more opportunities you're going to have coming your way. And, luck as well. People say that luck is when preparation meets opportunity. If you're prepared and you have a steady flow of opportunities coming your way because of your network, you can extract quite a bit of value from that. So I would say networking, like you said, it's a superpower, and if you can do it correctly, it can really change a lot of things. That's the reason why I've been traveling, just like you. I've been traveling pretty much every single month, going to different conferences, going to different places and different events, just meeting people and connecting them and seeing if there's any sort of synergy. And I've been doing that pretty much for the last 10 years, and it's been working out for me for sure.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm happy you touched upon that, because I think whoever is watching this right now have to understand, and I would like you to put the emphasis on that it is not easy. It takes tremendous amount of resilience and patience. And as I say to some people often, being an entrepreneur is as bad as being sick. You don't choose that. You love it and you hate it at the same time. And it takes resilience. So could you share a bit about that? Because I know you've been through some amazing up, but you've been through also some downs. And how do you go through this where a lot of people would just throw the towel?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that I got really good at learning is that the journey is really the reason why we do it. And I know that you feel the same way as well. And a lot of the followers here and the listeners, they do feel the same way. It's obviously we have these goals and these successes that we want to achieve, but I think more important than that is the skills that you learn along the way. And one of those skills is resilience or what we call grit. The best entrepreneurs are the ones that have grit, because the truth is that in entrepreneurship, just like you said, you're going to go through the highest highs and the lowest lows. And sometimes it's going to happen in the same day, and so you're going to have to manage that. I've had some pretty horrible things happen to me in business, as I'm sure you've seen over the last few years. I've had employees just start their own agency and steal clients. And I've had all sorts of things that happened, having to manage investors and having to manage clients that weren't happy and things like that. These things happen all the time. And it shows a lot in terms of like how you deal with that as an entrepreneur. Today when I coach people, what I tell them is that, especially when you're getting started, you might not realize it, especially when you're going from employee to entrepreneur. One of the things you might not realize is that business is a never-ending exercise in problem solving. And so there's never going to be a time where there's no problems in your business. Like, that's the point. That's the actual journey. That's the actual skill, is that you develop this problem-solving skill that is much more developed than most people, than the general public. And that allows you to go problem to problem without necessarily being emotional about what's happening or letting it take you down just because it's not working. And I think it's necessary for us to remind ourselves of that, because there is an epidemic among men. There's a loneliness epidemic. There is a suicide epidemic as well. I think the last thing that I read was like more than 80% of men, more than 80% of people that commit suicide are men. And if you look at among entrepreneurs, that number is even higher, right? And so it's really important to remind ourselves and our entrepreneurial friends that, like, yes, you are going to go through the lowest lows, but that's part of the journey. So when you find a problem and you are going through a low, you should be happy, because the business is showing you what you need to do to basically develop yourself as a person, as an entrepreneur, to move to the next level. And so it's often just a question of perception. That's how you keep going, and that's how you get through the lows.
That's so important what you're mentioning now. I think social media put too much light on how sexy and cool it sometimes can be to be an entrepreneur, but there's a lot of shadow behind that. And you've helped a lot of entrepreneurs. There's a lot of limiting belief, or I would say most people I know in entrepreneurship have some kind of an imposter syndrome at some point to deal with.
Yeah.
And could you touch base upon that? How usually you help people going through it, or how personally you went through it?
Yeah, like, I feel like usually, especially in the agency business, what happens is that you go from being an employee to being a freelancer to being a business owner, and eventually to being an investor. Every time you have to make a jump, like on that line, it's a difficult jump that requires a perception change. And for you to go through that perception change, you have to really ask yourself what your own limiting beliefs are. And that's something that I had to do for myself, and it's something that I help a lot of people with now. And anytime I see that they have to make that jump. When I was an employee 10 years ago and I had to become a full-time freelancer, and then when I was a freelancer and I had to start an agency from the business that I had done, I had to completely change the way that I was thinking. And I had to really go in front of a mirror and look at myself and ask myself, like, what are my limiting beliefs that are limiting my growth and that are not allowing me to move forward? And, in a lot of cases, you you just don't ask yourself those questions because you just don't think it's needed. But the truth is, if you start asking yourself that question, you'll see that everyone has limiting beliefs and everyone has things that don't allow them to move forward because of the perceived notion that they have about themselves, about how the world works, about certain perceptions around money as well. These are all things that become limiting beliefs over time. So, a lot of people that have like jobs, for example, they think that having a job is a lot more stable than having a company, right? We now know that that's not necessarily the case, especially with all of the layoffs, and anything can go wrong when you have a job. But when you have a company, you have tons of clients, and so if one of them is not happy with you and fires you, well, you just replace them, and you have tons of other clients, and your income is not reliant on just one person, right? So this was a limiting belief that I had to get over, and that a lot of people that I helped out over the years had to get over. And that's just an example, right? I think at every stage and at any time you have limiting beliefs, and the real exercise is in being able to audit yourself and really ask yourself, like, what is it that's limiting me from actually moving forward?
Yeah. And I think a lot of people that start a business think money is going to be the issue, biz dev is going to be the issue. But let's address the elephant in the room that a lot of people don't really talk about. Human. Working with people.
Yeah.
Growing fast. How do you manage that? How hard it is nowadays,
Yeah. I think I've been through different perceptions of how to deal with people within my business and within my company. The first company that I started, Startup Slang, the one that I ended up selling, that company grew to 65 people. We worked with some really large brands. It was quite stressful. There was a lot going on. We had offices in 2 different countries. We were working in different languages. Like it was a lot. And because it was my first business, I really approached that team like a family, and I really saw them as family. I was working with these people day in and day out, and I felt like I was responsible for them. And I realize now how much of a broken perception that was for me and for how I want to grow and where I want to take my business. I'm not saying that treating your employees like family is the wrong thing to do every time. I've had customers that have done that within their family businesses, and they really treat everyone that works there like part of their family, and it works for them, and it's amazing. But I noticed that for me and for my goals, I really had to shift my perception from being a more family-oriented sort of person to being very much more performance-based. So I had to turn this family environment into a sports team almost, right? So this is what I usually tell people is like, if you have a team that you're running, you're better off running the team like a sports team than like a family. Because in a sports team is very much based on performance. Whereas if you treat them like family, you can't really get rid of family, right? Like you make excuses for family and you accept their failures, and that's just how it is.
Yeah,
exactly. You're not necessarily going to put them on the bench. So with Startup Slang, it's way different than with BrandButter. With BrandButter, the agency that I run today, it is very much based on the performance. We evaluate people every 3 months. We either give them performance improvement plans, or we replace them altogether. And that's normal. Everybody that jumps on this ship, they know exactly what they're here for. They know the size of the opportunity that they're working towards. And they know that performance always needs to be extremely high, because that's what our customers rely on. And so it's super, super important. Managing people is not easy. That's why there's entire departments within organizations to do just that.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that with the audience, because I think it's important. I would like to finish with this question, because there's always something. Currently, at the moment, you have experience, been doing that for a long time. BrandButter seems like it's smooth sailing. What keeps you up at night?
BrandButter is not smooth sailing. It's a business, right? So there are always challenges within the business. What keeps me up at night is the problems that I need more help from my network to really solve. And I think that's important. Like, you're gonna always have problems in your business, like we said, but you would need a very strong network to be able to rely on, and to be able to even find just the right perception. I don't know how many times, Jeremiah, I had a problem that I didn't know how to solve, and I was like, okay, well, let's go out and get a drink with Jeremiah and sit down, and maybe all of his experience in business can combine with my experience in business, and I can find this problem. And I have many times because of you, and I'm super grateful for that. I have many friends that I do that with, and it has helped me so much along the way. So I would say, sort of, as we're moving into, it's almost been a year that we've been running BrandButter, right? Like in January, it's going to be a year. We're going to have our first year anniversary and stuff. And the journey, I wouldn't say has been as smooth as it looks from the outside, right? We all know, like, behind the scenes, there's a lot that goes on, and there's a lot of things that break all the time. But the goal is to get over those challenges. And I'm the type of person that really gets obsessed with a problem and with solving those problems. So if you ask me what keeps me up at night at any given time, it's probably the current challenge that I have in the business that I need to solve. But I got really good at solving it. And I'm really proud of myself for being able to solve those challenges and moving forward. And also my team and my network, because I wouldn't be able to do that without them.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And anytime, we're overdue for a good cigar. So whatever you want.
100%.
If anybody would like to follow you, ask you a question, what's the best way? Probably LinkedIn and BrandButter.me, I guess. Is there any other specific social media you would suggest people to follow you on?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is huge. I have about 14,000 people that follow me on LinkedIn, and I make content about marketing there. So you can find me at Damiano Raveenthiran. And then Instagram. I'm super active on Instagram. I talk to tons and tons of people on Instagram. If you send me a message on Instagram, I'm likely to answer. And so that's at Damiano R on Instagram.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Damiano, once again for being on the pod this week. And I look forward to see you pretty quickly, hopefully pretty quickly.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Jeremiah.
Thank you so much for being part of the Up at Night family. If you've liked what you heard today, don't forget to rate, follow, subscribe, or leave me a comment below. New episodes of Up at Night drop every week. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a single episode. I'm Jeremiah Curvers. Until next time.